NASA is catching up with Hollywood, releasing a real-life plan for putting human beings on Mars. Maybe while they're at it, they need to figure out how to rescue human beings off Mars. NASA's report, nearly 40 pages, 3 phases: the Earth-reliant phase, the proving ground phase, and the Earth-independent phase. What does this all mean? Bill Harwood joins us from Merritt Island, Florida, to break it down. So 3 phases before we can get to Mars. Just broadly, before we get to the phases, when might this happen, Bill?
Well, it's anybody's guess right now, Contessa. As you know, there's no funding for an actual mission to Mars with human beings. NASA and President Obama both have talked about sending humans to Mars sometime in the mid-2030s, if the budgets allow and the technology permits. But that's just a guesstimate at this point.
Okay, so this first phase, Earth-reliant, it involves research about how living in space would affect the human body. They're already getting some good research in on that, aren't they?
Well, absolutely. You know, the Earth-reliant phase is going on right now. That involves the International Space Station. As you mentioned, medical research is going to be a key factor for sending people to Mars on these multi-month, multi-year missions, and how you protect astronauts against space radiation, long-term exposure to weightlessness. All of that is being studied right now on the International Space Station and will continue to be studied. They're also looking at advanced life support systems, trying to figure out how to use the station as a test bed, if you will, to develop some of the technologies that will be needed down the road when people move out of low Earth orbit and into deep space.
Okay, the proving ground phase, I assume that has to do with sending humans and machines out for experiments in deep space to see how far can they go, right? I mean, they're going to have to boldly go where nothing has gone before.
Well, in a sense, and also in a sense, they're going to be revisiting the past a little bit. What they're really thinking about with the proving ground is what they call cislunar space. In other words, the region near the Earth-Moon system, but perhaps out even deeper into space and in the near term, for example, collecting a boulder from an asteroid that a robotic spacecraft would go get, that sort of thing. But the idea here is to develop habitation modules because, you know, going to Mars, you're going to have something for the crew to live in. They need to develop those technologies, very tight closed-loop life support systems where you don't waste anything. You know, you can't get resupplied on the way to Mars like the space station gets resupplied. They want to develop solar electric propulsion. This is a very efficient propulsion technology that they think will be very useful for long, deep space missions to Mars and beyond. And it makes sense to do all that in cislunar space relatively close to Earth, but well beyond low Earth orbit where astronauts are sort of tied down the day aboard the space station. You want to be able to test these things while you're still close enough to get home if you've got a major problem to work the bugs out before you take that big step and send the astronauts on to Mars where they're going to be on their own for many, many months, and these systems have to work and they have to be able to take care of them.
That would be the Earth-independent phase?
That's right. That's where you will either go to the moons of Mars, for example, perhaps initially a mission to orbit Mars, but the long-range goal, as you set up front, is to put people on the surface of Mars, with boots on the ground. And there's not a timetable in this report or any budget or really any real technical details. It's more of a broad strategy about what makes the most sense to get to that long-range goal. In other words, do what you can in low Earth orbit to understand this better, move out around the moon and still in deep space, relatively speaking, to perfect those systems, and then head on out to Mars and see what you can do. So it's a very long-range program, Contessa. There's not a lot of detail yet, but it's certainly something that NASA hopes will come to pass, and they hope the budgets will be there to support it.
Is there a good scientific reason for trying to put people on Mars?
You know, it's been said over and over and over again that one astronaut on the surface of Mars with his, you know, figurative rock hammer can do more than any robot by looking at the rock and soil and applying that human intuition and knowledge to its analysis. Now, it's a debatable point, however, whether or not that additional expertise is worth what it would cost, because once you put people in the spacecraft, the cost goes up astronomically compared to robotic missions, and that's a justifiable debate. That's something that you know, is something that people on both sides can certainly argue about. But I think from NASA's perspective, it's going to take people to answer those questions, those big science priorities. You know, was life on Mars in the past? Is it there today, for example? And how can you utilize Mars? You know, can you mine the resources to make rocket fuel and breathing air? All of those things to eventually keep large numbers of people on Mars as humanity moves out into the solar system. So to me, it's almost a toss-up between the science you would get and the technology that would have to be developed to make it possible. They're both valuable.
Bill Harwood, it's so good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.